Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm starting up a new character study and have invited Seaviyll to join me so we can talk about Yunobo from Tears of the Kingdom. Welcome to the show. Would you like to tell us about yourself, your channel, and how big of a fan you are of Yunobo?
Hey Pixel Fusion, thanks for having me. I am a content creator that makes tips and tricks shorts. I make other types of Tears of the Kingdom videos and plan to make challenge runs in the future. I really like Yunobo as a character, since he is this innocent kid who has gotten a lot of responsibility because of his heritage. He is kind of a goofball, but wants to do the right thing, but is a bit scared as well. And I really like his new personality in the most recent game, being this big bad boss.
Yeah, there is a lovable nature about the guy, and we will be breaking him down in this video. I have to admit that he doesn't rank the highest on my list of the new champions, but I do like them all, even Teba. For me, that whole escort mission up Death Mountain in Breath of the Wild was really annoying. In Tears of the Kingdom though, he is one of the more useful sages. I'm really interested in getting your input on his growth between the two games.
I totally agree with you about the Divine Beast quest in Breath of the Wild. I didn't like doing that at all. It was so slow, but personally, I don't see the new champions to be the experience with the Divine Beast, but more the personality. And when I met Yunobo for the first time in Breath of the Wild, it was a different experience for me than the other people. It felt more major. It might have been that Death Mountain is bigger and seems like a bigger deal, or it might have been the fact that I'm in love with Daruk's protection. Either way, the Divine Beast itself was a fun experience due to its puzzles and the boss. The last time we saw him in Breath of the Wild was when he used Redania to help Link in the battle against Calamity Ganon. He was proud of who he had become because of you, and that he will return the favor. When I met Yunobo for the first time in Tears of the Kingdom, I had the exact same feeling. I burst out laughing since he had changed that much. I laughed because it was funny to see that Yunobo, the frightened child who didn't know what to do, had become this arrogant person who tries to boss around people because he was the chosen one, because he was better.
It seems like you really like the character. I'm happy I found such a big fan of him to do this with. All the same, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the analysis, starting with his past. Taking a look at Yunobo's past, we can see that he was raised on Death Mountain. He is stated to be descended from the hero Daruk, which impacted him psychologically growing up. Having such a large shadow hanging over him, it clearly impacted his confidence, something that was only compounded by his own lack of courage. The first time that Link encounters him, he is literally cowering.
Yes, when Link first entered the mining room, Yunobo used his defensive battle power to protect himself since he was so frightened. I think Yunobo has had a fairly normal childhood for the Gorons. But when the Divine Beast started to become evil, he must have been anxious about everything. He was the one who was supposed to stop it. He didn't know how, but he knew he had to do it. For me, when I experienced his personality through the games, it seems he looks up to Link as a leader, because he doesn't know what to do. He has a very kind soul, is very nice towards the people he meets, compared to the other guys chosen by the champions. Like Sidon sees him as a best friend, and Teba sees him as just a guy who has to do his job. And Riju, I don't even know. Either way, his personality is very pure. He's the type of guy who will give you a present and expect nothing in return.
Right, each of the new champions, or rather sages, have their own personality, which is what this series is exploring. Yunobo's kind nature is very clear. He cares about his community, and about Bob Rudania. I'm more interested in talking about Daruk's protection though, and how he ended up gaining it from Daruk. They say that he is a direct descendant, and yet we know very little about Goron reproduction. What we do know is that in Tears of the Kingdom, a couple of old Gorons on Death Mountain, Trey and Volcon, talk about how Gorons come from the mountain when they are recounting how they were born together. One could infer that Daruk's protection isn't something that's genetically passed down, but rather taught to Yunobo. Or, if not taught to him, it could be talking about his inner firepower that was passed down. What are your thoughts about such an ability and how it would have been passed down to Yunobo?
Well, I think it's a hard technique that Yunobo learned easily because of his rock line and his relationship with Daruk. But I think the reason he can do it is because of his inner fire power. It's something that he got genetically, maybe it skips a generation, since we don't hear about his father anywhere. Or maybe his father never learned it, because Daruk didn't want him to learn it. Anyway, maybe Daruk's protection was a hidden power he discovered when he was little, due to his inner fire powers, or when he was truly frightened for his life. If it was only a technique, why wouldn't he teach it to Link? Maybe it was just for the people with the fire power to use. Since Link didn't learn the technique, he borrowed Daruk's power until the ghost disappeared.
You raise a pretty good point about his ability. Daruk's protection is very interesting because it was an ability directly passed down to him, as to where the other champions, and Zelda herself, had to learn to develop their own abilities. We know that Yunobo has a deep admiration for Daruk, and that Daruk's status as a hero was so renowned, he was carved into the mountain. Yunobo had to literally live in the guy's shadow. Given the ability to manifest Daruk's protection, do you feel that it fuels his insecurities? Perhaps that all the pressure of trying to live up to the great Daruk has stunted his ability to grow. That is, until Link shows up and inspires him.
I totally think it makes Yunobo more insecure. He doesn't know what to do and needs guidance, and he does not have anyone to help him until Link shows up. He looks up to Daruk as a legendary warrior. Trying to live up to that high of a standard has impacted Yunobo mentally and has discouraged him.
I think you're right about that. He generally needs a person to help guide his actions. We see that clearly in Tears of the Kingdom as well, but we can go over that in a later section. For now, let's talk about Daruk's protection as seen in Breath of the Wild. During the Goron story in Breath of the Wild, we can see him use Daruk's protection to turn himself into a makeshift cannonball. Given that we know he has the power of fire in him, do you think that the shield is him merely manifesting that power while taking inspiration from Daruk?
I think the ancient sages we see in Tears of the Kingdom are the reason Daruk got his powers in the first place. And that is also why Yunobo has hidden sage powers. The bloodline, or rather rock line, has been passed down and has a strong power within.
Well, hold on. We don't exactly know how that reproduction works. All that we know is that they are born from the mountain. The whole aspect of Goron romance, mating, and whatever else are a mystery. And what little was said in a developer interview back in 1999 has officially been thrown out in this game due to the revelation of Trey and Volker. Without getting too much into it, how do you propose this rock line is passed on since they are born from the mountain?
Perhaps the Gorons just place rock samples into the ground of the mountain and let them grow. Eventually, young Gorons emerge and are adopted by the clan.
That makes enough sense, I suppose, though it is making a few assumptions. The ancient sage does refer to Yunobo as a little rock, but also as a direct descendant. It could be that Gorons grow, fittingly, like rocks do, though I imagine it would take a very long time. There could be a part of Death Mountain that has potent fire power in it, perhaps around the fire temple itself, and that is where the ancient sage, Daruk, and Yunobo ultimately get their fire power from. Or perhaps it really has been passed down through the generations, all the way from that ancient sage.
Yeah, I'm sure there is a rock line like that. And that is where the power comes from. The shield we saw Yunobo use obviously wasn't Daruk's, but his own, since he made it himself, unlike Link who borrowed the power from Daruk. But yes, that is the fire power we see, manifested into Daruk's technique.
They do make it a point in Tears of the Kingdom that the new sages are of the bloodline of the old one. However, we see instances of non-sage people having elemental powers. For example, Yona of the Zora. She isn't related to a sage that we know of, and yet she has the power of healing water similar to Mipha. All I'm saying here is that it could simply be that some people are born with elemental power in them, and sometimes that can manifest. More importantly though, is the idea that this fire shield is based on the inner fire power that Yunobo and Daruk both have. Do you think that inner elemental power is what made Daruk, and likely the other champions, capable of being pilots for the Divine Beast?
I do think that is the reason for why they are capable of being the pilots. And as you said with Yona, obviously someone has to be born with these powers. That is how strong bloodlines work. Someone has to be the first one, but I'm saying that the reason Yunobo has these powers is because of his ancestors, not because of him being lucky like Yona. You can see this with Arito. The champions and the sages aren't related. Revali was chosen by the people and earned his power through hard training. Tulin probably got his power from being born with it.
In the case of Revali, I think it is safe to say that he had the power of wind in him and simply learned to develop it into Revali's Gale. The topic of Revali, Teba, and Tulin is best suited for another video, I think. So rolling around back to Yunobo, while he has that fire shield in Breath of the Wild, it is odd that it isn't brought up or talked about at all in Tears of the Kingdom. Do you have any theories why it doesn't manifest in Tears of the Kingdom, given that he clearly still has his fire power?
It might have been that he didn't feel like using a defensive shield all the time. He didn't have any good reasons to use them in this game. Besides the fight with the Demon King, when the Demon King sends a shockwave leaving all the sages on the ground. But it probably didn't have good enough reaction time to make the shield in time. Or maybe it's the case we see when Yunobo first appears in Age of Calamity. Daruk was sent away flying even though he used Daruk's protection. The power was too high for him to handle on his own, so the protection was no use. Or when the Demon King charged up the attack, Yunobo didn't think it would affect him in that way, so he didn't do anything about it.
I personally would have expected them to at least mention something, given that he doesn't portray the ability at all anymore. It isn't like we don't see defensive powers in the game either. Sidon will use his power to put a water shield around Link, for example, and Link can use that offensively as well. I think from a more meta reason, Yunobo doesn't use Daruk's protection because they wanted his sage power to be a mining function. That being said, there could be an aspect of his personality that are affecting how his fire power is manifesting.
Yes, in Tears of the Kingdom, he was a totally different guy when we met him. He was an insolent fool, but his ability is now more offensive. That might have been due to him wearing that mask. His abilities might manifest differently based on how he feels. And when he was under the control of the mask, he was more aggressive, instead of a defensive guy we see in Breath of the Wild. His powers may have changed while under the control, but his inner personality was still there. He's still the same nice guy we knew from Breath of the Wild. But his mindset might be different because of him owning a company, Yunobo. His mindset is now to mine, and now he needs a tool for it, which is the new power. He told us he got the mask from Zelda, and that he didn't know what happened under the control of the mask, and that might have given players suspicion about the Zelda character we see in the cutscenes.
Absolutely. I very much think that his aggressive nature is from the mask. We can see how he reverts when the mask is broken, and his stylish coat mysteriously vanishes. I like to think that after Breath of the Wild, he gained a bit of confidence, which is why he's founded by the company and is being supported by the clan's elder, Bluto. He even seems to have a couple of kids under him now. All the same, I think that you are onto something, that his change in confidence caused him to adapt the firepower into something more offensive. The guy still remains pretty gullible though, having an unwavering faith in the people around him. Hey guys, let me interrupt for just a moment. If you haven't done so already, would you consider subscribing to the channel? It really helps out and the channel needs growth. Also, it's free to do. Later on, you can always unsubscribe. Now, let's get back to the conversation. Let me ask you something. Do you consider his behavior in Age of Calamity canon? I suppose I should ask, do you consider Age of Calamity canon at all?
Well, his behavior should be canon, since it is the same Yunobo and the same personality we see in the other games. But the way Age of Calamity worked with the time travel stuff, it just doesn't add up. And it actually isn't canon because of how incorrectly the story went. The general idea of Age of Calamity should be canon, since it is kind of the prequel, but probably not the same universe as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Since in this timeline, Age of Calamity should have had a bad ending with them losing the war. I really like how he is in Age of Calamity though. Kind of awkward towards Daruk, since Daruk didn't know who he was, and he was very formal and didn't know what to say. And that really brings out who Yunobo is. Them ending up fist bumping as pals at the end is so wholesome to see. How he grew closer to his grandfather in the game.
It was nice to see for sure, but yes, there are parts of Age of Calamity that outright contradict the past presented in Breath of the Wild, even before time travel comes into play. The game should have been what we were all expecting, a game that accurately told the bloody history of the Calamity 100 years before Breath of the Wild. All of that being said, there is value in a what-if situation, and thus Yunobo's behavior in this has value. We see him again using his shield in this game, but also how he basically falls in line directly under Daruk. It reflects what you were saying before, that the guy needs an authority figure to help motivate and keep him going. We saw this in Breath of the Wild when he snapped into control under Link, and later in Tears of the Kingdom when fake Princess Zelda was ordering him around. Do you think that we'll see another Hyrule Warriors similar to this one? Perhaps one where we see the struggle against Ganondorf's forces, but in the present? Would you want to see a game like that at all?
I would like to see a game like that. I love the gameplay of Hyrule Warriors, and it's always fun to see more content in the world I cherish. But it's unlikely, since where would it take place? I know you said in the present, but it should have a different story and stuff. It should be either before or after Tears of the Kingdom. I'm talking about the time between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But nothing really happened there, besides rebuilding some of the civilization and the Puraped and all that stuff. It's just research and building until the upheaval happened, and there really isn't much action there. So to see a Hyrule Warriors game there would be strange. If it takes place after Tears of the Kingdom, it could work, but I presume they plan for the sequel to be a main game. Maybe it could be Tears of the Kingdom all over again, but differently told.
Nah, don't count on it. It could be placed in the past with the sages versus the Demon King.
That's actually a good idea. The story of the ancient sages.
Zelda in her desperation ends up calling back future allies to help with the war. Then we get an alternate ending where everything is nice and peachy. I'm kidding, of course. Well, half kidding. Please don't do that, Nintendo. Anyhow, I'm sure if Nintendo wants that money, they will find a way to make a new Hyrule Warriors game to monopolize on Tears of the Kingdom. I just hope it isn't as big of a train wreck. Let's move on though to Link and Yunobo's relationship. We already talked about how Yunobo basically needs a person to help keep him in line. I could never really shake the feeling that after Yunobo's initial rescue, there was more to his reactions than simple appreciation of his rescuer. That by itself already made them friends. We know that Gorons are born from the mountain, but there is still room for romantic relationships. Do you think that Yunobo might have some romantic feelings towards Link in Breath of the Wild?
I don't think there is any romantic tension between them. I feel like Yunobo sees Link more as a big bro than anything else. It seems like he's offering everything he can to make it even, since Link helped him become so much more. They've got more of a brotherly bond than anything else. The other new pilots have different relationships with Link, but Yunobo treats him like family. I don't think Yunobo needs a person anymore. He has become so much more independent after Breath of the Wild. Starting his own company, leading the Goron city, but it seems like he was happy that someone could help again.
Back in 2018 when I first played the game, I did get some vibes that Yunobo was crushing on Link, given the new revelation about their culture. I'm not really sure that is the case anymore. Some Gorons might develop a lifelong relationship akin to romance, but we now know that they would be strictly asexual. Though there could be room for something to happen when the time comes to, I guess, grow new Gorons. It's not a topic that I expect Nintendo to ever expand upon. One might wonder if that is what Trey and Volcon are aiming to do in this side quest in the game, but I digress. In the case of Yunobo's behavior towards Link, he's probably just surprised to find somebody who actually treats him well. Back then, I thought it could be signs of romance. But in Tears of the Kingdom, when the mask is broken, I don't get any hints of that behavior from before. Do you think that the young Gorons working under him are just workers? Or do you think he's taken on a more fatherly or mentor role for them?
I got the vibe that they might be family, but who knows? There might just be some kids wanting to help the community. Maybe Yunobo just adopted them. Or maybe Yunobo is just a very good mentor, as you said. The partner thing is probably just a pair of two pretty good pals.
Well, I think that we've covered the character rather extensively, from his personality, powers, relationship, and development. is there anything you would like to ask before we wrap up here today?
Yes, I would love to see Nintendo making new amiibos for the Sages. It would be awesome to have a little Yunobo.
Oh, I think that those are coming. How can Nintendo not pump out amiibos, am I right? Good luck securing one before they are sold out. Thanks for watching the episode. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'm planning to do one of these for each of the new Sages, each episode with a different guest, so make sure to click that bell notification icon so you don't miss out. This channel is made in part by my Patreon and channel members. At this point, it is because of them that this channel is possible. If you are in a position to help out, joining the Patreon or becoming a channel member is the best way you can do so. You'll gain access to my Discord where we can talk more directly. I am always up for a chat about Zelda stuff, and I love to speculate, so all you have to do is reach out and we can chat for a bit. That's all for this episode. Stay tuned for the next one. Be safe and may the way of the hero lead to the Triforce.